Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to TNC Launch and Learn series. So let me just admit some people more. Okay. So I'm Xiaoqiang Liu. Work at TNC as a agriculture conservation practitioner, and here with my colleague AG. I see August also here. Today, we're really glad and happy to have Tyler Miller to give a talk about the Cascading Waterway. So Tyler studied education from Bowling Green University, a state university, and he was a teacher for a few years. And then he started working, joined the Defiance County Soil Water Conservation District since 2013. Tyler has been running some voluntary nutrient management program, but also he has helped design some conservation practices like this Cascading Waterway. So he's also wearing different hat. he's living Defiance County with his family, his wife, and 3 kids. He's also a farmer, in addition to a conservation district. He has been working with his father to running a relatively quite a large farm, roughly 3,000 acres. So they mainly raise the corn and soybean. So without further ado, so please welcome Tyler to talk about this agricultural practice regarding the Cascading Waterway. Tyler, take the charge.
Well, thank you for inviting me to present here today. Everybody that's out there, don't be afraid to stop me and ask questions. I was telling these guys that I tend to be long-winded, and I may get myself in trouble. If don't be afraid to cut me off if you guys need to, or if somebody's got a question or whatnot. So the Cascading Waterways, kind of basically, we didn't really know anything about them a few years ago. And we started working on a project that in the old times we would have did a wascob, and which is basically you kind of dam up an area and you let a tile kind of slowly drain out the area, and those have kind of fallen out of favor. And we thought maybe you need a grass waterway, but we wanted to be more innovative. And I know one of our engineers from ODA said, hey, they're trying some neat stuff on the East Coast with these, they're calling cascading waterways, which for lack of better terms, I look at them as a waterway with a wetland inside of it. And so it really gives us the benefit of both of those practices, which is, I mean, practices we know that work from a conservation standpoint and have a lot of different benefits, but they're pretty new, and we got to figure out they do present a certain amount of challenges. Now I think I talked a little bit as far as the benefits go. The biggest thing with like a waterway is reducing sediment losses. And so that's one of our key things with a waterway is reducing sediment losses, which obviously we have that component in there. And then a wetland gives us a way to have some retention and to be able to hold on to that water and allow for some treatment within that waterway. And so there's a lot of different benefits there. And it ultimately probably depends on your soil type to a certain degree on how many of those benefits are observed. In our situation here in Defiance County, if you would look at a map of Defiance County, a Google map, you would notice there's a boatload of ponds around. We have soils that are very good at holding water. So the cascading waterway pools, they're very good at holding water, which is almost kind of a bummer because we would like that water to permeate down through the soil, but that happens very, very slowly in our soils. And in fact, most of our loss of water comes from evaporation in the summertime. Now I think, if I'm correct, I think TNC and OSU are they're going to do some research here coming up probably this summer on what's going on our Cascading waterway. Ours, we have the luxury, it's on Defiance County's ground. And so that becomes a huge benefit because we're able to determine what testing goes on there. Whereas we've had some landowners that aren't as excited about somebody coming out there and testing their water. Some are really excited about it and some very much are not. And so that is one of those, I would call it a challenge, is finding a site for it. And a site that works on a number of different reasons. And that would also include the landowner or who controls the land. One thing I think that could benefit on a cascading waterway that we did not do is having a subsurface tile run alongside the cascading waterway. Now, I mean, that creates a certain amount of issue with dissolved reactive phosphorus that could be getting into that tile and leaving. But it also allows us to cycle more water through those pool areas. And I don't know, I mean, there's more experts out there than me. But we don't really know how to control DRP. We just don't know how to control it. But we do know how to control sediment. I mean, so we have a lot of practices that are geared at that. And these are two that are definitely, I would say, geared towards that is that sediment control. And if we can have water permeate through the soil, then you can control some of that DRP. And some of you guys, depends on whether you have hydric soils or non-hydric, you know, your situation may be a lot better than what ours is for allowing water to go through there. We just don't have that ability. Some of the challenges of a cascading waterway, and I'm not downplaying them at all. They're a great practice. I don't think they fit everywhere. And it's like there's no silver bullet for DRP or nitrates or phosphate. It's got to be a suite of practices, right? So some of our challenges is you're going to create a lot of spoil or dirt when you dig up these pool areas. You're going to create a lot of spoil. A lot of landowners say, yeah, I'll take a pile of dirt. I don't think they realize how much dirt that they're going to be dealing with. And I mean, you can give them a volume of how many, you know, you might have, say, I got 1,000 yards. Well, they don't understand that. You might have to try to put that in perspective of, okay, you have a dump truck that can hold 5 yards and we're going to generate 1,000 yards. You know, do the math on how many loads we have to do to remove that. Some places work better where you could spoil that in the landscape. And in our example, we made what we called observation mounds. So we just put a couple piles of dirt out there. Happens to be right beside a wildlife center. And so it works out pretty good there. It's out of the farm area, but not in the wooded area. And so it's just kind of right on that edge. But that's what we did with it. But that's a challenge is what do you do with that spoil? Another challenge is grade, the grade of your waterway. So we generally speaking start using grass waterways at about what we call 2,500ths grade. So anything, if you're moving greater than 2/10 of fall in 100 feet, then you're going to start using a grass waterway because grass is needed to control erosion at that point. As you start stepping up that grade, just think if you're at a 1%, you're losing basically a foot per every 100 feet. And as the problem with that is, as you start digging your pool area, it is the amount that your pool will hold is dictated by what The exit ramp is basically on your downside, your downstream side of that pool. But on the upstream, you still have to dig at that elevation because water is ultimately going to find its level. So you may be digging something up a couple feet deep to not even hold water there. And so sometimes you like to dig really long pool areas, but they no longer benefit you because you're just digging a lot of dirt out just to hold a little bit of water. So that's something you really have to look at from a design standpoint is how can you fit those pools in there? And how long can you make them? Because the contractor wants them really long because it's really easy to do maybe one pool area. In our example, we had 3 different cascading waterways. They're about all the same length. They're pretty small. They're only about 400 feet long, each one of the waterways. And there's, like I said, there's 3 of them. One of them has 1 pool, another one has 2 pools, and the other one has 3 pools. The contractor that did the work, he hated the one with 3 pools because it was so much work just to do the finish work on the sides and the upstream and downstream side of it. It was just a lot of work for him. He very much enjoyed the one with the single pool, but you have to find the grade and the situation that it'll work in. Also, like I said, the landowner or the tenant or whoever you're going to be dealing with on the situation, understand that you might be farming. You're obviously not going to farm through them, but you're going to farm around them. And so nobody's probably going to want to drive in these pools. And so you have to kind of figure out how can this work with the farming operations so that they have access to get through there. I kind of got rolling here, and I said I was going to ask what you guys wanted to know about cascading waterways, and I never asked that. I told you I get too long-winded. We kind of started at more what I think of the basic level, but maybe we need to start further down. Has anybody got any questions or thoughts of where we should go from here? I got more stuff, but I don't want to get past somebody.
Hey, Tyler, I think Theresa have a question. She was asking what were the drainage area of the grass waterway? Yeah, in the chat.
Okay, Teresa, I have they are small watersheds. So mine are about 3 to 5 acres. So the concern with watershed is, and the document I designed them on is based out of Maryland. And the information, I believe it was like 1,500, it's basically a 0.15 acre inch that they're trying to design by. And by that, they mean as you have runoff off of each acre, we want to control 1/10.5 of that. Like if you get 1/10.5 of rain on that 3 acres, we need to hold that volume in that pool. Well, as your watershed gets larger, you need more pools or bigger pools. And so that can become a real issue in definitely certain places in Ohio. And, if we would put this into, say, a 50-acre watershed, that number would go up drastically. And now you're generating a whole bunch more spoil that you got to figure out, what are you going to do with? Can you fit this in there? Please clarify the Maryland design document. So there is a document. It was done by NRCS, I believe, out of Maryland, and I do not have that sitting in front of me. I apologize, but so they designed a couple out there, being basically the Chesapeake Bay region, and they just kind of went through what they did, which was they created a cascading waterway. So a waterway, they took an old waterway and put pools in it. And they have the benefit of their soils allow for that water to permeate down through the soil. And so what they're trying to do is they're really trying to diminish the amount of nitrogen nitrate that's obviously leaving into the Chesapeake Bay. So they're wanting that water to go down through instead of running off the landscape. And so they have that benefit of that working down through, where we may not have that as much. So I referenced that that drainage, the amount of water you're wanting to hold. In there, it basically says there's no science behind that. It just, that's what they designed, and they thought it was effective. So I'd say you could go with whatever number that you thought was best, or that your engineer will sign off on. And I think basically the max that they were shooting for was the 2/10 situation, but I would say anywhere from a 1/1500 to a 2/10 per acre inch is what you'd be after. And you can get that information from running, if we got soil and water people on here, running your EFH2 documentation, which is for you that aren't involved with that, that's basically a document that determines, it takes the landscape, the grade of the landscape, the soil type, what if there's trees out there, is it farmland, what kind of soil is it, how is it tilled, and it takes all that into account, and it tells you how much runoff you're going to generate from a certain storm event. And so we figure out how much is going to run off, and then we say, all right, we want to hold this much of it. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. Always keeping me. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys, because I'd be curled up in the fetal position right now, not knowing where to go with this. So I appreciate your guys' help. And then, so I talked a little bit about the soil type. That isn't, I don't want to say that is kind of an issue, but it's something to look at. Is, can you get water to permeate through there? And can you get, if it's super sandy, can you get that pool area to hold? That can be another concern. One concern I have that, we had kind of the first one in Ohio that got put on the landscape. Actually, Putnam had one designed before, so it just didn't get on the landscape before we did. And stone was one concern. So you put riprap on the top end of the pool area, and what that does, that prevents that waterway that's running into the pool. It prevents that from head cutting up the waterway. We basically had too small a stone, and it pushed it into the pool area, and so we had to put new stone in there. But one of my concerns is on the downstream side of the pool, is that grass stays really, really saturated, because it's always got water right there. Anytime from spring to midsummer, that's going to be really saturated, and it has a potential to kill that grass. And so that's another, I would argue, a benefit to having a subsurface tile run alongside the tile, alongside the cascading waterway, because it allows that grass to kind of be laid out. And so I see you guys got a picture up there. And so I was just talking about the rock riprap, okay, that would be running down into the pool, and then it would run out of the pool and then into the next one. And this is a typical design. You do a series of them, and then you got to figure out, like here, it looks like, I'm assuming they spoiled the dirt up on, I'm assuming that's probably a hillside up to the northwest, and that's probably a good place for it. Some places don't have that ability, and so you just really need to look at your landscape. The Maryland situation, they were looking at taking old waterways and repurposing them. And so the best case scenario would be, all right, you have a producer that has a grass waterway that maybe he's told by his federal partners that had a CRP contract that, hey, this needs a lot of work to keep it into CRP or EQIP or whatever. And he says, I don't want to do it. I don't think it needs it. And so he's not going to be eligible for that cost share anymore. that might be a great opportunity to put cascading waterways in, where now we can do some work on those, and we should be able to find some kind of, I would say, grant funding to do that. And then we're not getting in the way of our federal partners on a situation where something may not be eligible now, which is why I would kind of make, I know we have some NRCS personnel on here, but I would make a pitch that, hey, this should be a EQIP and CRP eligible practice. And the reasoning is that it's two practices we're already using. We've been using grass waterways and wetlands for a long, long time. And we're just putting them together. And I can't think of a better situation because we're not taking much of the landscape up. We're trying to have a dual purpose, you know, a multi-use waterway, basically. But that's probably, so we did not do that. We basically started a waterway from scratch. We dug a waterway and kind of made it really nice. And then my contractor said, hey, you're trying to ruin my waterway. And it was basically digging up potholes inside of his grass waterway that he had made and did a really nice job on. And that's the benefit of having one on an existing waterway, is you don't have to create the waterway from scratch. You can do a little work on it, but you can put the pools in. So installing them, I think, can be a little bit of a challenge. And the challenge is, what kind of tool do you use to get in there and out of there? We had a guy that he used a pan to get in there, a self-propelled pan. Most of you guys might call them a scraper. And so, but by the time he got in the pool area, he was pulling back out of it. It's hard to get kind of a flat bottom. Some guys dip them out, take big hydro hose and dip them out. The concern there can be, do you make the banks too steep? So that there's some finesse with creating them. You want a good contractor. If you have any ability to help pick the contractor, which as a soil and water and federal partner, we don't really have that ability. We can make suggestions and say, hey, I think these 4 or 5 guys could do a really good job for you, and allow them to pick one. We were able to kind of handpick who we wanted because it was on our ground. So that gave us a nice ability to do that. One thing I've heard a lot of people kind of clamor for is wetland species of plants on the edges to be planted, or I've even heard trees. The concern with trees is that we got to farm around them. We might be running a sprayer in between those pool areas to get from one side to the other or something like that. So that can be one concern. And then I think what we've seen on ours is that when you allow the pool area to be there, the wetland species will come. The frogs will come. The different grasses and rushes that are wetland loving, they'll come. I don't know how they get there. Somebody's got a better answer for that than me. But we see those out there. And so I would say, hey, let Mother Nature take its time. It won't happen in the first year. Plus, when you're digging that stuff up and you're maybe 3 or 4 foot deep, you're not in very good soil at that point in most places in the state. And to get vegetation to grow there can be difficult. One other thing to check out would be, if you have subsurface tile in that field, you want to make sure you're not destroying that. And yeah, you talk about riprap being sized in there. I started with ones, number ones, and I told our engineer, I won't name him on the camera, I said, it's not big enough, it won't work. And I'll go on record saying I was right, he was wrong. And so we ended up putting D's in after that because they just wouldn't hold too much force coming down that waterway trying to run down that. And so after that, we've kind of changed that, where I don't think you need any bigger than D's unless you had a really, really large watershed that was going to push into there. So I knew this would happen. I'd start rambling. Do you guys have questions?
Yeah, anyone have questions? I think it's probably a good time because we're gonna try to finish in 12:30. So it's probably a good time to end up here. Like, and then if you have any questions, please just ask Tyler so we can have some discussion.
Do you build levees between pools or constant grade? No, we did not create a levee on that. We allowed it to be the grade of the waterway. I would say I thought about it. The only problem is when you do that, you have to allow it out basically one side or the other. And then it's going to tend to want to wash in one spot. So it's going to make kind of a point source. And I think that's what you need to be careful of, that you don't put a grass waterway in to create an erosion problem. And so I would be interested in, I really haven't seen a lot of it, but I know Williams County, they put in a different kind of, it's not riprap, it's kind of like a erosion resistant, I'll call it a blanket, but a material down there. It'd be interesting to see that work in a cascading waterway. Monitoring. So we monitored one time through, I want to say it's Alloway was the company. And props to, I think it was Putnam County. They kind of lined that up before we went out and did some research on that. They basically they had a trailer out there, which they were trying to sell their trailers, I think. And they tested like 4 or 5 different events. We even tried to, myself and the extension agent even tried to go out there and we spread fertilizer around one of the pools to see if we could get a response in on the top side of the pool and then a change on the bottom. We didn't see it, but the problem is our water's not setting in that pool long enough. Like in the springtime, it's pretty much going into the pool and then running out. I haven't been out there the last couple of weeks to see if our pools are down. We do have one that goes down pretty quick, but it's because it does have a tile that's really close to it, and it tends to evacuate out fairly quickly, and then it'll get filled up, and in the next week or two, it'll drain out. Did I catch? Yeah, so I said type D. For those that don't know stone sizing, just like your driveway may be 8s or 6s, and that goes all the way down to 1s. 1s are, hey, you don't like walking on 1s. And then it starts going to the letters, and then it goes D, C, B, A. And D is, I'm going to say, somewhere in between a like softball and volleyball. C is going to be, that was D. C is going to be like volleyball to maybe basketball. And like B and A, you got to be talking about really big ditches or rivers that you're dealing with. I think these have a place in our future. I really do. They don't belong everywhere. They just don't. But there's a lot of places they can be used, especially expiring waterways, expiring grass waterways. I would say soil and water districts or NRCS people, those are good places to look for them. And try to find, if you can use TNC or EPA or somebody that might have some grant funding. And I'll put a little plug out to our grant funding people. One thing I like that we've did some stuff, GLRI stuff in the past, is making small grants where it's just a couple practices, because sometimes it's hard to come up with, hey, you need to come up with 10 cascading waterways in Defiance County. That's sometimes hard to do, to come up with a lot of practices, since districts are already taxed with a lot with H2 Ohio and other workload. If you can say, hey, can you find one for us, and we'll whatever. As far as the money goes, I would say look at a grass waterway and multiply the number by about 3 to 4 times. That's what you're going to have in it cost wise. Any other questions? There you go. You guys didn't have to pull me off the stage at 12:30.
Anyone else have questions? Oh. All right. If not, then let's thank Taylor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tyler, for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for listening to me. I know I'm long-winded enough.
You did a great job. You did a great job. And then we really appreciate that you come here and then provide your kind of unique perspective, as a conservation district designer, but also as a farmer. So thank you. Yeah.
And hey, we have them here at Defiance. They're really close to our office. If you come up here and want to take a look at them sometime, if we set something up, we'd be more happy to show you guys that. I know Williams has one. I know Putnam has one. I know there's others out there. I'm just talking about the 3 counties that are closest to me. So, but if you guys want to look at them, by all means, don't be afraid to holler at us. We can go take a peek at them.